Namaskar. Good afternoon to one and all. As was mentioned by most speakers, the credit for holding such a very important meeting and for having thought and conceived of this kind of a conclave, I wish to place my appreciation on record to the Chief Minister of Uttarakhand for having been so futuristic in getting states which have typical long pending desire to be heard for the unique issues that they face, address, and also which stand out in India's growth planning. I suppose connect of some kind, and Himalayan states therefore are very close to the heart of most of us who come from the south for its beauty, for the green nature that you show us, the rivers, perennial rivers. And so there are ever so many reasons for all of us to be attracted, but I have particularly had the fortune, both as a inquisitive student of the university in Delhi and also subsequently as a party worker, to have served in many of these states. And I was just telling the chairman of the Finance Commission that I've been fortunate to have visited each one of these Himalayan states, not just the state headquarters, but also many of the interior parts. And my admiration is something which I really can't put in words. Of course, the presentation given on the disaster management particularly stands out, because those are the kind of concerns which all of us have had in our minds from a very different perspective. Here was somebody who's managing the national disaster management and relief, but as an outsider who's frequented this area, the Himalayan states, yes, all of us somewhere inside us want the facilities as a tourist, but where do you draw the line? The concern, of course, hits you the moment you reach the place you plan to come, whether it's Aizawl or whether it's Mussoorie, whether it's Shimla. The gradual depletion of greenery, the gradual progression of concrete, all of that hits you. So not just from the point of view of environment, not just from the point of view of the states and their growth concerns, but there are huge concerns which affect not just India, but the entire world. Like every time anyone talks about environment concern, we refer to the Amazon, the biggest lung for the world, and so on. But what we forget to speak here is the contribution of the Himalayan states and the green cover that they provide, the water resource that they supply, and in the process, the very festering debate about development versus environment. I have also, at various stages as a political worker, been part of these debates, and I know what place it has in evoking the sentiments of the local versus others who are perceived to be upholding the virtues of environment. But I'm going to have to tread. Of course, I'll try to be cautious, but I'm also going to have to tread on this debate a bit, because I think the moment we start talking in black and white terms, this or that, or the binaries with which we promote one argument or the other, the image is of either you take this or there's no solution. I don't think we are at a stage in India today to talk in binaries. Everyone wants and everyone has aspirations. Every state has aspiration. But has it got to be in the way in which some other state has realized its aspiration? That is where I think when one of the chief ministers spoke talking about imitation, I'm not sure who mentioned it. Was it the disaster relief person? Imitative solutions are never going to help. Transposing something from elsewhere is never going to help. So when Himalayan states have an issue, and they've seen it in the way in which the first few minutes of the frightening presentation showed, copying technology, copying systems, copying things from elsewhere because it suits us quickly, has of course been the biggest irritant in most of our development planning. And therefore, the way in which I would like to put forth my viewpoint is, please temper down the desire, the aspirations with the ground realities. And while doing so, I would start with one, institutionalize this conclave. Institutionalize this conclave whereby each one of your thoughts which are coming in will now become part of your policy planning. Otherwise, again, once you have had this wonderful meet, especially in such wonderful environment, today here in Mussoorie, tomorrow in Shimla, environment will always be good for us to sit and talk. But post the talk, when we go back, the reality in the ground of, I have to take care of my people, I have to take care of my political setup, I have to take care of, people who have supported me. End of the day, we are back to square one. We really can't afford it. And therefore, institutionalize this mechanism. The frank talk which happens here will have to now become part of every one of the states' planning. I'm going to have to say a few mix of things. The ones which short term, immediately what I would like to ask of you, and short term, immediately what you would like of me have all been heard. But the few things that I want to say are both mixture of long term and short term, and therefore please pardon me for being here to give you an unstructured presentation, but I'm only throwing up ideas so all of us can somewhere take them on board and think about them and not take it as, oh, the finance minister came and gave us a diktat. Not at all. The issue of migration from the border town. Blame me for starting with this point because I carry my memory as a former defense minister. The issue of migration from the border towns, Uttarakhand's chief minister probably will definitely be able to relate to it straight away. पलायन के बाद जो उत्तराखंड जब करते हैं, उसका इम्प्लीकेशन नॉट सिर्फ उत्तराखंड के इकोनॉमी के ऊपर मगर भारत देश के सिक्योरिटी के ऊपर बहुत होता है. इसलिए मैं मानती हूँ अगर प्लानिंग करते हैं सिर्फ उत्तराखंड नहीं, अरुणाचल प्रदेश, सिर्फ उत्तराखंड नहीं, अरुणाचल प्रदेश नहीं, असम, सिक्किम, बॉर्डर के इलाके से जब, क्योंकि उधर फैसिलिटीज़ नहीं है, प्राइमरी स्कूल तक अच्छा नहीं है. मैं ये नहीं कह रही हूँ आप नहीं दिया है, मगर जितने हैं अभी वो काफ़ी नहीं है. इसीलिए अगर स्कूल्स नहीं है, प्राइमरी हेल्थ सेंटर नहीं है, अच्छा सड़क भी नहीं पहुँच पाता है, लोगों को उधर रहने का कुछ भी कारण बचता नहीं है, नीचे आ जाते हैं. As a result, you will have a stress on the nearby urban centers. उसके कारण आपको हाउसिंग का प्रॉब्लम, लॉ एंड ऑर्डर का प्रॉब्लम, ये सब तो हम सब मानते हैं और मानकर चलते हैं भी. मगर इससे ज़्यादा दिक्कत मुझे जब बॉर्डर के इलाके से जनता नीचे आ जाते हैं, उधर भारत देश के आंख और कान नहीं होता. We have absolutely no eyes and ears in the border, and every inch of the border is beyond the security forces to man. And unless the locals who know the movements of everything, of the cloud and of the men on the ground, unless the locals live there, national security is at a great risk. So even as we talk about the Himalayan states, probably I'm going to have to talk about a lot more of the need to keep the Himalayan states largely intact in the present contour, in the present way in which it is geographically and otherwise. So you would probably hear me talking more about what should be retained rather than feeding into what your aspirations are. And therefore I cautioned you even earlier, I'm going to have to talk about things on which I have to be careful while treading. So if the border villages will have to be maintained, that question which the Finance Commission's chief covered himself carefully saying I'm addressing something with my naivety is actually not a naive question. He is actually in his own sweet way posed a question which has very serious implications for which I want to concede he may not have the answers, I may not have the answers, but I'm sure the states have the answers. But not probably immediately. You may have to think of an answer for it. ये तुरंत जवाब देने का ऐसे विषय नहीं है. स्टेट्स अपने आप हर एक स्टेट अपने तरीके से इसके ऊपर सोच विचार करना पड़ेगा। अगर हम फिनेंशियल डेवल्यूशन लोकल बॉडीज़ को और पंचायत को कर नहीं पा रहे हैं, फिर वहाँ तक केंद्र सरकार की ही सड़क जाना है और वहाँ तक केंद्र सरकार की ही ऑप्टिकल फाइबर जाना है, वहाँ तक ही हमारा BSNL भी बरकरार पहुँचना है। तो हाँ, पहुँच सकते हैं, मगर आप समय सोच लीजिए इसका टाइमलाइन क्या होगा। इसीलिए हम हमारे पंचायत राज इंस्टीट्यूशंस के ऊपर और थोड़ा भरोसा के साथ डेवल्यूशन करके परफॉर्मेंस इंडिकेटर्स रखिए कि आप कहाँ तक पहुँचना है, क्या करना है, कितने दूर तक आप कर पाओगे हर एक एजेंडा के ऊपर। ऐसे करके कुछ प्लानिंग ज़रूर हर स्टेट उनके अपने तरीके से बनवाना चाहिए ही। वो एक विषय मैं आपके सामने इसलिए रख रही हूँ कि आखिर जब आप हिमालयन स्टेट्स के टोपोग्राफी एंड ऑल्सो सेटलमेंट, ह्यूमन हैबिटेशन का सेटलमेंट के ऊपर चर्चा करते हैं, यू नो, ऑल ऑफ अस नो, दे आर वेरी स्पार्स एंड स्प्रेड, they are so dispersed, widely dispersed, and habitations don't have that many number of people which typically the Niti Aayog or Finance Commission or comfortably the Finance Ministry would describe, unless they have 500 households, unless they have 1,000 population, unless they have X number. This will not apply to any of the Himalayan states. So this is not going to be the criteria. And if you give that criteria to your own states and then say, please also go ahead, like the way, I'm glad the serious task of the states which have been established by the 14th Finance Commission, I'm not blaming them. It's an issue on which all of us will have to think about. Are we talking about states' growth and tax buoyancy, and at the same time expecting the tide funds coming and reaching your doorstep, which by the time you seek exceptions for untying and using becomes too much, you're 5 years over? So there is a serious administrative and governance issue, I concede that. But beyond that, I also think, again, my naivete, I would like to pose this question. If you were to look at $5 trillion economy, India has to grow at a certain rate, and also environment commitments given by our own Prime Minister in Paris, which was appreciated and till today appreciated by states by all over the world, countries all over the world, which say India has gone well ahead of many other states in committing itself for so many different environment impacting goals. Whether you're talking about renewable energy, many of the states in Himalayan states are the ones which contribute to our hydroelectricity. Arunachal Pradesh, for instance, will soon probably be supplying more than 50% of India's requirement in energy. All hydro. Will the temptation of wanting to move out of thermal generation, and probably more favorable is hydro, of course ideal would be solar. I'm not sure ideal is ideal today, but even the cells of solar batteries and other things are all issues. But never mind, progressively, if you want have to make a chart, hydroelectricity, which probably is the biggest thing which many of the northeastern states are contributing. They're contributing. Green cover, they're contributing. But when we talk about aspirations versus commitments, is it only then the Himalayan states which will have to constantly forego development as other states are envisioning them, because they have to keep their forest intact, because they have to keep their water sources intact, because they cannot build roads wherever they want, because they can't have airports wherever they want? End of the day, India's contributors to growth, are we going to have them in two silos? The Himalayan states doing their commitment for environment, and the other states who are doing their growth and contribution towards India's growth from a point of view of development, the usual development, imitative development debate that we can have. So are we then saying we have only two large silos into which we are going to compel some states for being the protectors of environment, being the protectors of a water resource, and the others who will go about doing, to the extent that today many states do not even have any more space to have extra tree plantation done. So within the state, if there were carbon credits to be claimed, they don't even have space for tree plantation. They don't even have probably public space available for sewer treatment plants. Imagine to what extent that has gone to one extreme. States which have some industries which are doing very well towards contributing towards India's growth cannot have common treatment plants because in the neighborhood there are no common places available. You can't obviously ask a private person who's living in his house to say, please vacate, you're very close to this unit, I want to have a treatment plant here put. Situation has reached that stage. So in a way, there could even be a fancy idea which all of us can be the first ones to reject. A fancy idea where I would say probably some of the states which don't have space even for tree planting should pay up to some state of their choice from the Himalayan region and say this many acres of forest will be funded by me. People living in its neighborhood will get money from that state because it's no longer got the place for planting trees. Are we going to do that? Otherwise, I can't see how this balance between development and in the process of development wanting to have carbon credits, and that is not possible in those states. But here you have excess green cover. Excess is not excess any time when it comes to green cover. You have adequate green cover. You have adequate rains. You have adequate rivers. So will other states, because after all it's the larger picture of India that we're talking about. We have commitments to keep, international commitments to keep. We have population which has to grow. But does that mean those youngsters who are living in those Himalayan states, rich in green cover, wealthy with water, are going to have to just live their lives there, but seeing Bangalore's and Hyderabad's and Chennai's develop? So there is a very critical debate which all of us will have to address ourselves, and I will only at this stage leave you with that question of how are we going to balance these two. Also is an issue on which I feel very closely and sentimentally close to an issue of man versus animal. Most of these states which are close, the Himalayan states particularly, do not have a solution for the man versus animal conflict. Even that is now becoming worrying in its proportion, and we'll have to see how best we're going to handle this. But yet, even as I say, man-animal, man-development, green cover versus development, environment versus development, I know parts of some of these states where I've been to myself, which has immense scope and potential in bringing international connectivity. International connectivity, particularly even as you're talking about improving India's neighborhood policy. I can name some of these places which I feel very sorry about as to why in our last 60 years, we've not even made an impact. But no, not even decent roads. Similarly, I remember, I don't know if there are representatives from Tripura here, to open a border hut, Tripura's international border with Bangladesh, from Agartala, we had to fly within that state, Tripura, to an international border which is important for Tripura's economy. Recognizing the importance, we opened up a border hut, but the road condition was so pathetic that from Agartala, the Chief Minister and I had to go taking a helicopter down to the border point, international border. And we are still talking of connectivity, not international border in the tough Himalayan terrain, where the complexity, the three-dimensional planning that you have to do for laying the roads in those, India-Tibet border and so on. But here, Tripura, to its border with Bangladesh, riverine, we have no connectivity. So there are issues where whether you're talking of environment commitment versus development commitments, animal versus man conflicts, there is a need for us to balance out. And of course, the burden on the Himalayan states is far higher when you're talking about the ways in which you have to protect your fragile environment. It is fragile. And I wouldn't mind watching an entire presentation by the NDRF expert who's here, because it highlights how far we have gone. And that is why when the cloud burst happened in Kedarnath, there were ever so many thoughts coming saying, it's not natural disaster, it is man-made. I do not want to contribute to that judgment at all. But surely, did we go too far? Was there a way in which we could have planned it better? So those are issues on which I think, at least now that we have a forum, this forum of the Himalayan State Conclave will have to apply its mind, talk it out among ourselves, and take it further.